Hello, Dr. Flynn. This is Hunter Metcalf, and this is the last, well, one of the last videos that I'll be creating, and this is a demonstration of the Android application that we'll be using. So let me go ahead and talk about it first. It didn't go as planned. I'll talk more about this later in the video, but basically this app, unfortunately, is not implemented how I originally had planned it, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So let me bring up my Android Studio. Okay, so here's the application, and I called it a Maps activity. And basically, the application is not implemented at all of what I wanted. As you can see here, there's a key set of functionality that I cannot use, and it's called an On My Location Change Listener. Now, since my service is a location-based thing, what I had originally planned when I was coding and researching this throughout the year is that when the location would change, the map would pick up that change. It would take the latitude and longitude here. It would add that marker to the map, and then I have written a database to store that location, which I could use later. And this unfortunately is no longer supported by Google Maps and therefore is never called. So the only piece of functionality that I have on the map is this piece of function that says on map click, because I wanted to verify that my map was actually listening for action listeners, which it does. So each time the map is clicked, it'll create a new marker, and it'll add that marker with its latitude and longitude. So let's go ahead and look at the application. Just to look at before we do that, let's look at the database that I had originally used. It was a SQLite Open Helper, and I have a query right here to create the table. And as you can see, it has the table name. Let me go to the table data. I have these basic constants of latitude, longitude, database name is location info, and table name is locations. So looking at the database operations, we have create table, and it pulls the table name, and then with what rows we're going to use latitude and longitude, and both of them are going to be text fields. And then we're going to create our database and log that the database was successfully created. And on creation, this is an important method. This is like any Android application, the main method is the onCreate method. So the onCreate method for the database, we want to execute that SQL query create query, which is right here at the beginning. And basically that's what's going to establish that. And then I have a put location into database. And this is what unfortunately is not used in my code because, well, the listener's never called. So what it would do is it would take the database that you're referring to, it would take the latitude and longitude, and it would store that information on the database. And it would do an SQL insert here with the table name. So going back to the maps activity, as you can see, here is where it would insert that information into the database based on where the location was changed. I also noticed there are some bugs in the way that Android Studio handles location changes. I was never able to confirm that my location even changed. So that's one big thing. However, I did notice that this is no longer used. So let's go ahead and look at all that I do have done, which is nothing I originally wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and click here on the Run Maps activity. I'm using a Nexus 6 API 23. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. As you can see, it's giving me a warning that on my location change listener is deprecated. My current Gradle build is running. And here is my Android application. So now that it's loaded, Gradle build will continue to build, so give it a few minutes. It takes a little bit of time. As you see, the stuff over here turned red as it's trying to rebuild the entire library. So we just have to give it a few moments. And in the meanwhile, as I mentioned, the project didn't go as well as I originally intended. However, there was a new API released by Google, and another interesting thing to note that was actually difficult, that made the project more difficult, is, as you can see, I have a global variable called Google Map. And basically, give it a second, Android Studio actually froze. But this global variable, Google Map, is set in a function on map ready. The issue is, anytime I would reference this mmap outside of this function, it always gave me a null pointer exception every time. Every single time I received a null pointer exception. So the only time I could actually utilize the map was in this on map ready. So that was actually a very difficult thing to actually figure out. I never figured out why, and I think it has to do with a security feature. So let me go to, apparently the Nexus loaded up finally. So as you can see, I had automatically set a pointer or a marker right here to Sydney, Australia, and as you can see, that is there. So just zooming in, you know, we have these things, and then as I mentioned to you before, I click on the map and it'll add a point on the map, and then clicking on the map, it'll show the latitude and longitude of that point. And the thing that was buggy, and I'll show you, is that clicking here, it's called extended controls. It's location. So I click send, and as you can see, it kind of is a delay. It doesn't really send. You're not really sure if it actually sent to the actual device. So how am I to record location changes when the device itself, I'm not sure if I ever received a location change. Another thing to note is I don't have an Android device myself, so I couldn't test this application on an Android device. So unfortunately, and let me go ahead and close this because you didn't really get to see it start up. So I'm going to go ahead and start it again, Nexus API. Hopefully the Gradle build won't take as long as it did before. So let's give it a moment as it starts up. That way it doesn't look like that I did this. I'm not sure. The Gradle build is causing all these errors to pop up, and then it'll go away. Okay, here we go. So let's go ahead and wait for that. One key thing to note is that in the Android manifest, once my Android Studio unfreezes again, I don't know why there's so many issues with Android Studio, but I have to add permissions, uses permissions, find location, course location, internet, network state, write external storage, and read G services. So what are each one of these things? Well, the find location, course location are your location, the device's location. Of course, you need the internet and access network state because I need to use the network in order to access the Google Map. And then it's key here, as you'll notice, it'll say Android name, API key. There's a value here, which just got changed. But this value is the key which is referred to in the Google Maps. I'm actually not entirely sure what is going on with my Google Maps service, but as you can see there, it just finally loaded. But this key is important because if you don't have the key, you can't access this Google Map. You can't actually access it. And you actually have to set up the credentials of the Google Map here and the Google APIs. And that's where I got a key which I have to use in my Android project to set up my Google Map. So overall, the project did not go as intended. I wasn't able to implement the functionality that I originally wanted due to the deprecation of one of my main listeners. However, I did get to play with Google Maps, and I did get to learn a little bit about how it works and a little bit of the finicky things. And it is undergoing many updates. So I hope you've enjoyed watching Dr. Flynn. And I mean, again, as I said before, I did not finish what I had originally proposed, and I really wish I did. But hope you've enjoyed watching. Even though the video was small, it still is a somewhat neat demonstration of Google Maps and working with the API. So I hope you have a great day. And as I mentioned before, I had the database created to store information, the analytics on the project. So have a great day, and I appreciate you watching.